What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Actuali Podcast and our weekly live stream series, Meaning Making 101. I'm Chris.
I'm DJ.
And today we are going to cover the issue of how to determine what is one's political leaning. You know, this whole idea of left versus right. I'm sure you guys have noticed that it's almost like the tables are flipping and the left is now supporting a lot of issues that we used to see, we thought the right supporting, and now the right is supporting issues that we used to see the left supporting, like being anti-war and anti-corporate influence and so on and so forth. So the traditional left-right political spectrum model, it's just too low resolution. It doesn't account for all of the nuance that we have out there. We had a great comment on one of our videos last week on our last week's live stream from the People's Party USA. And this gentleman stated, well, here, let me bring it up real fast and look at it. He stated that there's no such thing as a left or right populist. The left-right spectrum is antithetical to the very idea of what populism is. I agreed with that point. I thought that was a great point, and that was very much in the spirit of last week's episode, populism versus the establishment. And so he shared a video with us that I thought was excellent. You enjoyed it as well. And so we're actually going to cover that video today for the first 15 or 20 minutes or however long it takes us to cover that. And then we're going to just take a deep dive into this subject matter and see if we can bring it full circle back to the subject of wisdom, cultivation, and self-realization, which we love to talk about on this podcast. So that's the plan, guys. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us here today. And let me go ahead and get this first video up and ready to roll. Check it out, guys. Where does the left-right spectrum come from?
In 1789, France was on the brink of bankruptcy. So to address the crisis, the French king, Louis XVI, summoned a meeting with the three estates of French society, the clergy, the nobility, and the commoners. But this meeting didn't turn out quite as the king had hoped, because at the meeting, the third estate, the commoners, made a bold and unprecedented move. They declared that they, and not the nobility or clergy, truly represented the French people. Following this declaration, which was the starting point of the French Revolution, the people who supported the revolution started sitting down on the left side of the assembly hall, and those who opposed this revolution started sitting down on the right side of the assembly hall. And this seating arrangement is the origin of the left-right political spectrum.
Isn't that interesting? So this is the orientation. This is when this began, this idea of thinking about ourselves as left versus right.
So basically one is for change and revolution and one is for not. In France, it was the left is the revolutionaries. And in the United States, I guess it's like, you know, the way we use left and right, I think that would be it. You know, we would put liberalism on the left, which was kind of a radical revolutionary kind of idea to begin with, and then conservatism on the right. Now, I don't think left has a monopoly on liberalism.
Not by any means.
And particularly since when things change, you know, that's my biggest problem with left-right is as time changes and as people change, what sits upon the left and the right is not solid.
Yeah, it's not fixed.
Fixed.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's changing as well. So these actual groupings ideas are changing, their beliefs. Yeah.
And then if you go through like history, you know, like, well, was Hitler really right-wing? And, you know, there's a lot of discussion about this because, well, Hitler was a socialist. He was a revolutionary. He actually wanted a peaceful, nonviolent revolution. That was because he thought
what was the name of his party?
The National Socialist People's Workers' Party.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is in German, but that's where we get the
So
Nazi
he initially
thing from.
wanted a peace movement?
Well, not a peace movement. So at least from what I get from studying, as much as I've studied on it, is that the movement was to be ushered in a more peaceful than the communists and the fascists, which were very, very violent. So it was get power peacefully, you know, because they weren't rounding up the Jews from the very beginning. It was like, you know, more fashionable kids clubs, you know, go out and do that stuff.
So
and
he
then
had to
you
play a
get
certain role before he got to the point that he could start locking people up in mass and
committing you know,
mass genocide.
You know, these people are I won't say they're insane, but like they're insane. And I believe he was thinking, oh, you know, this was the right thing to do. And it's kind of right. You know, if you want something to go forward, whether it's good or not, it kind of has to be peaceful, or more peaceful than the other examples of revolution, because yet again, he's still a socialist.
You got to express your ideas in a way that can win over the people.
Yeah, he was
first.
just the least violent socialist as far as in his eyes until well, actually, you know, if you get down to it, like really, like, you know, the Holocaust was absolutely awful,
horrifying,
and you know, the taking over of Europe was awful. But
as far as other dictators,
communists killed way more than the National Socialists did.
Even more than the Nazis did.
If anything, the most moderate probably would have been the fascists, because they didn't really get out and do much other than in Italy. And
moderate,
not saying,
and we're saying moderate as far as these despotic, insane, totalitarian regimes. Like, we're not saying this is good at all.
No,
absolutely not.
As far left, revolutionary, and up authoritarian, you can go. It would be.
We're going to cover this 4-quadrant model too that you're speaking of. Yeah,
which has some problems, but
it does.
You put communism far left and far up, and then you would stick National Socialism next to that, and then closer to the middle, and the absolute authoritarian would be fascism.
And we'll show you this visually shortly, guys.
Yeah.
And for those of you listening, you know, we highly recommend you join us on YouTube or Spotify, where you can watch the video version of this podcast, so you can see the models and diagrams we'll be showing today.
Yeah, but you know, that's just an idea, and that's been argued about. So like, nobody jump down my throat. I'm not entirely like, I know Hitler was a socialist and not a fascist. He was a National Socialist.
Mussolini, certainly,
but
fascist.
I don't like whether he's left or right. That argument is still being had by people a lot smarter and more educated than I am.
Well, that's the problem with the left-right paradigm. It doesn't encompass all the nuances of different people's points of view. And, you know, somebody that's an opportunistic dictator type is going to utilize whatever works for him to gain the people's trust and to gain power. So he could have used a mishmash of traditionally liberal versus conservative or traditionalist points of view in order to popularize himself.
Yeah, and actually, I think it was Mao who said this, or, you know, one of the people writing for Mao. But the revolutionary will, you know, the left-wing revolutionary will inevitably, once they win, become the right wing, and then the new revolution will come. So there's that end too. So that gives us kind of a spherical rotating matrix to this whole thing, and that is kind of true.
Yeah. So the 2D model, this bipolar model where you got left and then you got right, it fails us. It is just way too low dimension. It's
1D.
1D, actually.
Yeah,
you're right.
1D.
Yeah, 1D, but
then
the polarity.
And then the 2D, if you do authoritarian, libertarian.
Then you're onto the 2D.
And then you can get into 3D if you want to do secular versus religious.
But
and
you were talking about how you have like this 3D version of a model in mind that you're trying to figure out. And so we'll talk about that too after we get through this video, guys. So this gets really interesting. So now we're going to get a good description of this left-right spectrum that DJ and I were just talking about. And here it is. Let's go.
Spectrum, conservatives are to the right and socialists to the left. And sometimes other labels or more steps are added, like radical, progressive, liberal, moderate, or reactionary. This left-right spectrum is interesting, because there is a correlation between respective sides of this spectrum and certain policy positions. People who identify with either side of the spectrum, they tend to hold a particular basket of political opinions.
I like how he's using the right colors for left and right.
For example, tax cuts are today considered to be a right-wing position. This means that if person A supports lower taxes, then he's also more likely than not to support other positions that currently are clustered on the right wing, such as support for Israel's military actions and opposition to immigration. And conversely, if person B supports higher taxes, then he's likely to be on the opposing sides of all of these other issues. In other words, he will oppose Israel's military actions and he will be favorable towards immigration.
Yeah, so,
Interesting, huh?
but that'll change quickly enough, you know, and also you don't, like, I know personally people who consider themselves pretty heavy on the left that aren't really down with taxes either. They're more like, who are we going to tax more? Opposed to no tax or less taxes. And immigration, I know a lot of people on the left right now that have just seen what's happened to this country in the past 4 years with immigration. And, you know, like Aurora, Colorado, look that up. You know, you got gang members taking over apartment complexes and stuff. So a lot of people are really not happy with that, and that'll shift. To say that somebody on the right has to oppose topic by topic by topic with a person on the left, or vice versa, is just kind of stupid, you know. Like, and we apply this to ourselves too. It's a stupidity that we do to ourselves. It's like, oh, well, you're on that other side, so you must disagree with me on everything. And it's like, well, okay, this is too simple.
And we've all done this, right? Haven't we? We can all fall into this trap really easily, but we're in such a destabilized time right now. We're kind of raising the alarm to say, hey, guys, we've got to calm ourselves down and try to actually understand each other now, instead of allowing ourselves to be so easily pit against each other. Because, as we say repeatedly on this podcast, we're in the midst of a game of divide and conquer. It is divide and rule, hit the people against each other, and you can take over much more effectively. We have an oligarchy. We have ruled by the incredibly wealthy multinational corporations that have no interest in the Constitution this system of self-governance is founded on, as well as other free nations around the world. And they are trying to take over, and they're being pretty good at it. They're doing a pretty good job. Wow. And we have to find a way to counter this. And so this movement, you know, like last week, we covered how Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian of the Young Turks are actually joining forces with other populists, left, right, center, independent, what have you. Populists are coming together. And so we're going to explore how populism is actually neither left or right in this episode. And we're further going to encourage that unification that we're seeing happen right now, because it's a beautiful thing. And this is the way that we can get this country back and cease being ruled by the least among us, these wealthy, hoarding people that are unable to understand that love is the highest way that we have.
Well, not just like the super wealthy elite either, but also those who make it a point of preference to be antithetical and peripheral to everybody else. You know, the far fringed ideologues. You know, and obviously we've seen the past 8-10 years, maybe 15 years. You know, the far fringe ideologues have been on the quote unquote left and have come from, you know, progressives and liberals. But you just wait, give it another 10 years, another 15 years. Like, it cycles, it breathes.
Yeah.
Human madness is like an organism that just sits there and goes.
Yeah, right.
You know, like some Cthulhu, you know, Call of Cthulhu-esque stuff.
Or Moloch. Remember that video that we did on Moloch?
No,
oh my gosh, guys, go back and look that up, where we covered Liv Bourret and the subject of Moloch. It's like a demon that is infesting all of us and addicting us to tribal disputes and, you know, literally encouraging narcissism and identity politics and all these things that pit us against one another. So, yeah, that's the game. So now we're going to look at, why do beliefs across separate issues that are unrelated actually end up clustering together as either left or right positions? So check it out.
That someone who's for lower taxes also is more likely than not to also oppose immigration, even though these two are completely different topics. Well, the most common explanation for this that you will find in textbooks and newspapers and hear from pundits is that the left-right spectrum actually captures an important essence of human nature.
There's that essentialism.
This has been called the essentialist theory of politics.
Yep. And now we're just going to zip ahead and we're going to look at, what is this essentialist view of politics?
Yeah, and that's the, you know, we covered this in the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis lecture series that we watched, and the idea of essentialism and when it came around. And the idea is that, you know, humans, or, well, everything has an essence to it that is like the most human, or is like the primordial rock. Every rock
essential,
has the essential rock.
Yeah, rockness to it.
Rockness.
Yeah. Like the primordial
yes.
forms. Yeah.
Nis is an essentialist argument. Nis.
Yeah.
But I'm
So
not an
believe
essentialist.
if you believe in this policy, you must be left, and if you
Yeah.
believe in this policy, you must be right. Is what the essentialist view details.
Yeah, and I don't think there's an essence of rock, a nisness of rock, because there's so many different kinds of rock. Even the same kind of rock is very different rock to rock, right? People are like that. All things in the universe are like that. The only essential thing is God. That's the only essential thing that runs through everything.
Right. Yeah.
Because it is everything and no thing.
Yeah. Yeah. We were talking on this last night. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the non-dualist view of reality rather than the dualistic view of reality, which just sees opposites and separateness. The non-dualist, which is a view recognizing the inherent oneness of all things, sees that all things are interconnected and indivisible, and so on. So let's go ahead and understand what is the essentialist view.
The essentialist theory of politics is very similar to astrology in that this theory says that there is a simple way to completely understand someone's political views. All you need to do is to place a person on a left-right spectrum that is based on one single essential parameter: how much you want change. If you want change, you're on the left. If you don't want change, you're on the right. Your position on this line, in turn, supposedly explains all of your other political beliefs. So the reason why someone who wants lower taxes also supports Israel's military actions and opposes migration is because that person is anti-change.
Yeah. Yeah. So you see how strict this view is and uncompromising it is.
Well,
that's unfortunately inaccurate.
Well, the thing is if you here, keep that up for me real quick.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So if you're with the taxes, right? If you're for lower taxes, you want tax cuts, it's still change because you're going from higher to lower. Mm-hmm. So there's already like an issue with, and I'm not saying that the author of this video is stating that, but this is just what we are going through. So I'm not digging on him. So there's an issue with it right there. Mm-hmm. Israel military we support. Well, that's also change now, because the state of Israel is new as far as our involvement and the West's involvement with it. So many empires have taken that piece of land over. Mm-hmm. So that's also change. Yeah, maybe maintaining a change that was made.
Another point of clarification: everyone that is anti-change doesn't necessarily oppose immigration. In fact, a lot of people, let's say current conservatives, they don't oppose immigration. They oppose illegal immigration. I think that's an important distinction as well. There that is being missed here.
And there are some people that don't really want much immigration, and if it is immigration, the best and the brightest. I think that's the best way to err. Like if you're going to have people come into your country, make sure they're good, upstanding citizens. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. Hey, what's up? Official People Party USA in the house. Welcome back, brother. Thank you for joining us. So towards the end of this video, we're going to see if you can help us understand that Navajo concept of Diné and what that means and how we may be able to create a better model of how people align politically through that. So let's go ahead and check out this next clip. Diné clip.
It's an EH in the back of the throat. It's a very interesting sound.
Yeah. So why the essentialist view fails?
If the essentialist theory would be correct, then all of the issues that are bundled together on one side of the spectrum would stay there across time and across context, because they're all supposedly to be pro or against change, but they don't. Historical evidence shows that issues constantly shift between the left and the right.
Yep.
As for taxes, the famous right-wing politicians Boris Johnson and George H.W. Bush both adopted tax increases, while the left-wing Barack Obama and Tony Blair both implemented significant tax cuts. And as for support for Israel, the man who's considered the archetypical right-wing extremist, Adolf Hitler, would clearly not support Israel. Meanwhile, it was the Democrat Harry S. Truman who was instrumental in establishing Israel in 1948. As for immigration, the conservative icon Ronald Reagan wanted to grant amnesty to millions of undocumented immigrants. And meanwhile, even the socialist icon Bernie Sanders has voiced opposition to unhindered immigration.
Yep, so you can see how things change over time, and people in one or another ideological grouping can still hold positions that would be counter to a lot of the other people in their tribe. So this left-right political spectrum and the essentialist view really fails us here.
It's and also another metric to gauge whether an idea theory that you have works is also to apply it cross-culturally across many different cultures. And this falls apart too. Even if you just go to Britain, Britain's left and right is completely different than America's, even though Americans and Britons are more similar than, say, Western and Eastern culture. And that's just within one culture. Now, if you go to Eastern culture, does it work? Are people that are, against change considering themselves on the right in, Vietnam? Or, so I don't think it holds up. And that's where the confusion is with all this is coming from, because there's so much news and, scholars and other people that are just using this terminology because it's the best we got for now.
But it's pretty low resolution terminology.
Yeah, but it's not good.
It's not helping us.
We probably shouldn't be using it, but we're kind of stuck with it at this point. But later in the video, he gets into a little bit of being more specific when you say somebody is something. I'll let him say that.
Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and carry on now with this clip. Let's go ahead and get this ready to roll. Here we go.
In other words, there is no fixed essence behind the left and the right. Also, it doesn't matter if you say that the true essence is not change, but instead, for example, big versus small government, or equality versus hierarchy, or collectivism versus freedom. Any proposed essence falls apart under scrutiny. Research has also shown in experiments that people's views on issues do not cluster to the current left-right spectrum until after they're socialized into the left-right way of thinking. But then the question remains, right? If there isn't a single essence that binds together all the positions that are held on either sides of the spectrum, like whether or not they're pro or against change, then why do many people bundle their positions to what is currently considered left-wing or right-wing?
So now we're going to get into the subject of tribalism, which is precisely why.
What's interesting,
how this happens.
So this spectrum left and right is very dialectic. And that's, two opposing forces, like one idea and another, and the antithesis of a thesis, and then its antithesis, and through some magical dance between the two, reason and concrete understanding is going to come. And I think that's a load of poppycock, personally. I think there's a little bit to it, or it very, very fuzzily describes a small portion of a much bigger phenomenon. But I don't like it because, I don't think it works because, I have an idea. I want to build a house. Oh, no, we're going to have to destroy the house. Well, and then also not everything has an antithesis. So, when it comes to, say, these political ideas between the left and the right, there may not be an antithesis to an idea or a standpoint. But if you are socialized into the left-right spectrum, you're gonna have to create an antithesis.
Yeah, and you're also just going to be automatically adopting views on subjects that you never had any interest in, just because your group supports that subject now. And we see this a lot. We've all, I believe, have fallen victim to this as well. We're not all born critical thinkers. We have to learn how to do that, and we're constantly tested in life. So we're all learning as we go together here. There's really no blame. We're just trying to find a way to further our capacity for collective thinking, for how human beings can put their minds together and figure things out much more accurately and efficiently than we can on our own. We have to figure these things out together. We have to have these hard conversations. So let's see how tribalism forms our political opinions. Let's dig a little bit deeper into this.
As fans, I support this team year after year, even though all the players, all the coaches, essentially everything about the team is constantly changing. There is no fixed essence that binds me to the team. It's just my chosen tribe. And most of us realize that it's this type of tribalism that forms our sports loyalties. But what many fail to realize is that it's also this type of tribalism that forms most of our political opinions. In their book, The Myth of Left and Right, Hiram Lewis and Vernon Lewis argue that we form our political positions just like we form our sports loyalties. People first anchor into an ideological tribe because of family, peers, or a single issue that they feel strongly about, and only then adopt the full range of beliefs associated with that tribe. They call this the social theory of politics, and in their book, they point to overwhelming evidence that this theory better explains political attitudes than the essentialist theory that we have just discussed.
There it is.
Well, we will see.
Yeah, tribalism forms our political opinions. We will just automatically jump onto another issue we know nothing about because our chosen tribe believes it as well. And this is a huge problem for us as humans. We want to belong. We certainly don't want to be ostracized or cast out of our tribe. And so the social pressure to support the views that your fellows believe as well is very strong. And most people automatically assume that their side is better and smarter than the other side. So they'll automatically just believe things they've never looked into because of that assumption.
Yeah, well, I think the danger, though, of, trying to just get rid of the tribalism is I don't think as humans we have the ability to flourish and survive without that base tendency, because then we become very unmoored. But I think instead it should be an augmentation, or if your group of friends are all acting stupid and want to go get really drunk and do burnouts on a bridge, you can say, okay, you're my tribe, but I'm not going to do this with you. This is stupid. I'm actually going to encourage you not and make your tribe better, because there's only so many people that any one individual can relate to in their life and actually have meaningful, tangible bonds. But on the end of just, like sports tribalism, or my country's better than your country, or my God's better than your God, or my dad can beat up your dad kind of stuff. When it goes to that extreme, yes, that is very destructive and we should be careful. But I don't think we should be entertaining the idea of eliminating very useful survival techniques that we've developed as a species.
The fact that we develop group affinity is a healthy thing, so long as we're not closing our minds to the point that we're trying to believe the exact same thing everyone else around us believes as well, because that group is never going to grow or evolve anywhere, So it's very healthy for us to be able to be in friendly relations, even in a tribal kind of affiliation, with people with whom we disagree, but we still love. We might recognize the same issues, but we're going to have different views on how these things should be solved. And
check it out like this. Like a good way to do it is, you have your friends group within your neighborhood, and then that is a tribe nested within another tribe that would be your city, or town. You got your neighborhood, and then you got your town that you're in. You're proud of your town, but then ultimately that's nested in your region. If you're like an East Coast person or a West Coast person or something like that, and that's nestled in the country. We are American. And then that's nestled in, we're all creatures on this tiny little beautiful ball hurtling through space under God. Whether you believe in a God or not, and which God you believe in, still there's something that's way much bigger than you that you are nested in.
There is room for us to widen our circle of compassion and consideration, essentially infinitely. Even if you don't believe in God, you could increase that circle of compassion to include not only this planet and all of its life, but all potential life that is out there throughout the entire cosmos. And I think that that's very helpful for us. I think that that's, in fact, absolutely necessary for us as a species, particularly at this point in history, to recognize that inherent interconnectedness that we share with other life, even life that we are not particularly familiar with. And if we can get that sense of the sacred, even just a hint of it in somebody else or something else around us, then I think that we're much more in a state of communion, and we are able to better align ourselves with what may well work best for one and all.
Yeah.
So beyond our tribes, we want to continually widen that circle of compassion. That's a very Buddhist or Christian notion, but I think it's a very helpful one. It's certainly helped calm societies a great degree over time. We've slowly but surely been civilizing ourselves over the years, and we do it in herks and jerks and steps back and steps forward. But I think these ideas of universal love are absolutely integral.
Yeah, and do all this wisely, not naively.
Yeah,
because if you make your tent too big and you let in the wrong types of people, the free riders, well, they're going to eat you out of your tent. They're going to eat all your stuff. They're going to take over, and they're going to take over your tent.
Yeah.
So you have to be wise about it. And we do have traditions and rituals that have helped with that through time. Part of it is, like you ever wonder why you ask your soon-to-be fiance's father for her hand? It's not because necessarily he owns her. It's a very pessimistic way of looking at it. He is responsible for her and her safety and making sure you're not a freaking loser that's going to be bad for her.
Yeah.
Because children are special and sacred.
And bad for the future of the family, and thus bad for the future of the community, and so on and so forth, because it can actually infect the entire nation and the world. Our disagreements can rattle around the entire planet.
Hey, Ninja Bat.
What's up, Ninja Bat? And
Yes,
Official Part of USA, some great comments here, brother. We're definitely going to get back to all of this once we get towards the end of this video and start exploring the Navajo concept of Dinech.
Yes, and I am alive. The evil has been expunged from my body.
Yes.
Yeah. Don't want to talk about it. It wasn't good.
Yeah, we're glad to have you back, brother. Glad you survived. And so that was the social theory of tribalism, how tribalism informs our politics.
Yeah, and getting away from the essentialist theory into the
social theory
the
now
social
to
theory,
further explore the tribalism a bit further here. Let's check this out. Rolling.
Religious Americans are today strongly anchored to the American right-wing tribe, but research shows that it wasn't until the 1970s, when abortion became a political issue, that the religious groups anchored with the right-wing tribe. Not until then that they adopted other opinions of the American right-wing, like lower taxes and climate change skepticism. Another fun study showed that when self-identified conservatives were told that Donald Trump supported a policy like increased minimum wage, then they would also strongly support it. But if they were told that Donald Trump opposed that very same policy, then they would also strongly oppose it. As the famous scholar Dan Cahan has put it, people endorse whichever position reinforces their connection to others with whom they share important commitments. So the weight of the evidence points to that there is no philosophical essence, like pro or against change, that binds together the different views on the left and on the right. Instead, what binds opinions together is mostly social conformity.
Yeah, group belonging, tribalism.
And I would have to say that, yeah, there is an aspect to that should be paid attention to, but that also doesn't take into account the mobility from one tribe to another that we experience through life. Like the saying, if you're young and you're not a liberal, you don't have a heart, and if you're old and you haven't become a conservative, you have no brain. That kind of point, it's a little tongue in cheek, but it kind of points to, well, when you're young, you're in with one idea and one group of people, but then as you age, you move out. And literally, you move out of your parents' home, you stop rebelling against them. Now you have to figure out what they were doing, and now you're changing, becoming your parents, and then moving to another city and doing this thing, and then raising a little hellion that does the same thing to you did to your parents. Well, that's a shifting through tribes, if you will. And yes, there are pressures all along the way, but it's yet again not static. Just like with the the spectrum essentialism doesn't account for the emotions of an individual and groups of individual through time.
Mhm.
This one also wouldn't account for that. Or if it tries to, the accounts and the definitions won't last long enough to be useful.
It's unreliable.
Yeah, so-
yeah, it really is. Alrighty, so left versus right thinking is that one-dimensional left versus right model, and then now we're going to look at a 2D 4-quadrant model essentially, and this should help elucidate things a little bit further. This is another model that is not actually particularly as reliable as we would like. Here we go.
Where left-right thinking makes us believe that all of these issues can be condensed into a one-dimensional spectrum conceived during the French Revolution. That is absurd. Some researchers are experimenting with adding more dimensions to the spectrum. One example is the Gal-Tan model that takes a traditional left-right spectrum and adds another dimension with Gal, green alternative and liberal at one end, and Tan, traditional authoritarian and nationalist.
Okay, so
Yep.
and this is upside down from
The way you've seen it before.
which is fine. It doesn't really matter. But then traditional and authoritarian aren't. That's the wrong place to put it. Traditional would be right, not down. Authoritarian would be down in this case, and nationalist could go either more authoritarian. So yeah, you could say that would up. And then green. Oh, grain. I know a lot of conservatives that really care about the environment. They're just not buying the crap that the World Economic Forum and the WHO and the UN are selling, that we have to sacrifice humanity to Gaia, which I don't believe either. There has been a
Because
small...
we are Gaia. I think people forget that. We are earthlings. We're literal outgrowths
Yeah,
of this
well,
planet.
and also it's a bunch of the highest level elites telling us peons that we're not allowed to eat the food that is good and healthy for us, and we need to shut up and eat the bugs.
Yeah, the corporate-friendly version of environmentalism just talks about global warming, does not talk about the poisoning of our oceans, the destruction of the ground soil, does not talk about the microplastics or the permanent chemicals in our bodies. It doesn't talk about any of that stuff. It has no interest in that stuff. It only wants to talk about what it can control and find ways to make money off of people through carbon tax credits and things like that. So it's actually quite subversive what the elites on this planet have pulled off. They've really pulled the wool over people's eyes and made this another very divisive issue.
Well, and the thing is, when it comes to climate change or global warming or global ice age going into one, back in the 70s, we didn't have much information, and the elites of institutions and governance just accepted this as being true. And they're like, it's going to warm by 4 degrees Celsius by 2012 or whatever that. Yeah, well, it didn't. We do have warming, but they're going to have to prove, is this causing a problem? And also, we do have more CO2 in the atmosphere, but we're also seeing greening across the planet by a massive rate. So, like, they're just looking at a problem. The problem of it leaves, well, the whole half. It's like, okay, what benefits could there be? And so, green, I wouldn't put that anywhere on the spectrum. That's just a load of hogwash, in my opinion. Now, they may, okay, they put it in here. And alternative, what does that mean? The only things that really make sense is authoritarian and liberal, and then you could put nationalist down in there, but I would actually put that on another dimension.
Yeah,
Nationalist
this is the
versus
problem with
globalist.
words, is that they are mere labels pointing at something. Like the word tree is never a tree. An item on a menu is never the actual food that you would eat at the restaurant. And so these words are very low resolution placeholders, kind of like an icon on your desktop that when you click, it opens up an in-depth document. So getting to know somebody, you should be getting to know the document, not merely judging them by the icon or the label that you would give the group that you perceive them belonging to.
Getting to know all about
So then that's why these kinds of models fail, because all of these terms, they, end up becoming interchangeable, like DJ was pointing out earlier, we're moving through these quadrants. We're changing as we grow, and not just ourselves individually, but the groups we even belong to and what they support and believe. So the whole thing's so amorphous. These kinds of very strict, firm claims that this is exactly how the left thinks, the right thinks, the liberal or the traditionalist or nationalist thinks. They're not as accurate as we would like them to be, so they kind of fail us.
Or they were useful at one point in time, but are no longer useful.
Kind of like useful for a period, but then things change so much that it's no longer valid.
Yeah, certain traditions you should keep because they're still useful. Others are like, well, maybe we shouldn't be sacrificing our children.
Really?
That was probably never useful unless well, humans are a superstitious bunch. We'll do a bunch of crazy stuff. But the idea of like sacrifice, that's an old tradition that we have a religion about this says, okay, this is the last sacrifice. God is not accepting any more sacrifices after this because this is the last one. Jesus.
Yep.
Which completely changed the world. So maybe that was good to get rid of. Others, I think we should keep the, institution of marriage. Like, don't get married so willy-nilly. And if you do get married, really try to make it work out. It's better for your kids, better for you, better for humans, the most humans.
I see your comment here, Ninja Bat. Alternative equals truth seekers, not ascribing to any group. Agreed. And
but there's alt-right.
I like this comment too from Official People's Party USA. We are Red Mother Earth. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because we come from Earth. And iron is in all of our blood. Interesting. Yeah, we all bleed the same color, don't we? We're all made up of the same planet, and we are outgrowths of this planet, consequent of this sun and earth, and the unique flavor of earth. We are the earthlings that are now the speaking, aware aspects, extensions of this living planet. What a trip. So let's go ahead. Let's look at the 3 things that we can do to overcome this tendency to oversimplify in these political models. What can and we need to resist? I have a little bit of issue with the word resist, simply because what one resists persists. You're actually strengthening something that you just outright resist. We need to create new models that make the existing models obsolete.
Do you
Mr. Fuller style?
Do you resist the water, or do you figure out how to move within it? If you're in a river and you just try to swim against the current, you're screwed.
Yeah, but semantics.
You have to. Well, no,
but language is important too, right?
It's important. Instead of resisting, like it's just fighting against it. You are not a rock big enough to resist this flow. You have to navigate through it.
Invent a new way.
Yeah.
So let's go.
Inspired by the book The Myth of Left and Right, here are 3 things we can do to resist this pressure. 1, let's go granular. Don't call things left or right. Say instead what you actually mean. If someone is a wealth tax advocate, call him that. Don't call him a communist. And if someone wants to stop immigration, say that. You don't have to call her a right-wing extremist.
But if they are
fair points,
if they are a communist and they're like, I'm actually a communist, and then they state stuff that is actually communism, they're actually a communist.
Yeah, and so these terms that we use, they're like shortcuts to understand something, but like we said earlier, they are very low resolution. They don't hold too much data because we are such amorphous beings. So you really do need to get to know the person behind the label to understand what they believe. Even if they identify as a communist, they might actually hold a lot of views that we share
or if
and
they
agree
don't,
with.
Or if they don't identify as a communist, they might hold a lot of views that are actually. Well, that's the thing. Is like
traditionally
we're going around
communistic.
calling people communists and fascists, and have you read communist papers and theory and read Marx? Have you read Giovanni Gentili? Have you got into it? Have you listened to all the critiques to really know what those things are before you called somebody that? When you call people a Nazi, well, have you read anything from Hitler? Have you take the time? Would you have the strength to go to the library, a strength of character, and rent out a book about Hitler and then walk down the road with that? Because you need to know about it, but they're going to call you a Nazi. It's like, no, I'm trying to make an argument against it. Really? Nazi? These words are descriptors, and we need to make sure we're using them to describe the right thing. Because if I'm saying ball and I'm actually pointing at plate, that's not going to help. Hey, hand me the ball.
That's why it's so helpful to clarify one's terms. When we're talking about a subject, what do you mean by that word when you say that word? Make sure you understand, and then be able to steel man that idea as well, so that you are sure that you have comprehended it. All right, here we go.
2, let's disagree.
Let's
So I
disagree.
sometimes get comments like this.
I saw around 5 to 6 videos of yours and were amazed by the quality in every aspect. I was just about becoming a Patreon supporter. Then I watched this video about migration, and you've lost me just there.
Left-right thinking spreads the myth that you have to either agree or disagree with people about everything, which is of course neither true nor possible. Instead,
What a boring, stagnant world that would be.
we have to welcome disagreement, especially with people we respect.
Yeah,
Because research shows that allowing for disagreement makes all of us smarter and more efficient.
Yes, it does. Helps us feel actually more comfortable and secure in reality too. And then we realize we actually can work together. We're not as different as we believe ourselves to be.
No, we're more similar than we are different, but the differences we have are can be beautiful and very apparent as well. So, official People's Party. I'm an Angle. LOOL. Marx was a publisher. He stole all of his stuff. Try not to cuss from Angle.
Yeah.
They were friends. They were friends, but Marx was definitely a mooch and a dirty bastard that just kept taking all because Engels had the money. Right. So, Marx is a bad friend. He was like the bad philosopher friend that just eats all your food, takes all your money, probably tries to sleep with your girl,
As official People's Party USA says, Engel was the brains.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he was definitely the better writer of the two. But there was a certain personality that Marx had that was, even though he was just a gross, like physically gross, smelly, oil-ridden, awful person to be around, but the magnetism was there. So you got the brains and the magnetism.
There you go. Yeah. I like this comment as well. Official People's Party. If it unites, it is populist. If it divides, it is not populism. That's a good point. That's a good point.
Well, actually, what the population and polis and policy and politics, that's a coming together of peoples, like say on the hill in the case of a polis, but the root of the words is the grouped together of people. Well, actually, it's even in the people. It's even in that word,
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
Well, so I think this would be a good point now, Official People's Party, if you're still in the room, to help us understand the video you shared with Wally.
Real quick, before we go into that, I just want to make a statement about populism.
Mm-hmm.
We should err towards populism, but if it goes too far, as in like, say, the voice of the people and enough people go crazy and start doing stuff, it's incumbent upon the free thinkers to actually say, like, no, people, what are we doing? We can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Just like we should probably err on nationalism opposed to globalism. Even though if you go too far into nationalism, well, you get National Socialists, the Nazis, or you get really regressive conservatism. So err towards populism and nationalism, I would say, first take care of your nation of people.
I want to say patriotism instead of nationalism.
Well, I want to say nationalism in the sense of the nation.
Love of your nation, patriotism.
Yeah, and well, authority, where you get, are you spreading it all out globally, or are you spreading yourself out globally and your way globally, or are you trying to contain it
In an
keep it
imperial
contained?
fashion first. I got you.
Yeah, because like the difference between communism and National Socialism, or say fascism, is communism wanted to be global. In order to have communism, the entire globe needs to do it. Whereas like National Socialism is like, screw all y'all. If we want it global, we're just going to take over the world, and the whole globe will be Germany.
Whoa.
Yeah. So little different, but any too far extremes, I would err on not globalism, but populism, because even though groups of people can make stupid decisions, I think
And be wrong sometimes.
I think ultimately, though, we work pretty well together when we just go, okay, yeah, well, 7 out of 10 is pretty good.
Well, the opponent processing is built into the populist movement because you have people that are left, right, and center. You have people across the political spectrum. So we're actually helping each other narrow in and narrow out and calibrate together to find these solutions that work best for one and all, that we can all agree on well enough to operate under. So that's So I agree with that
Yeah,
notion.
so let's fix America first, then worry about all the rest after.
Amen.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at.
Yeah.
I love all the peoples of the world, but I can't really do nothing to help none of them. So I might as well start as locally as possible. In America, yeah. Oh God, what a great bit of satire that was.
Yeah. So now I'm hearkening back now to your comment on last week's video, Official People's Party USA, and you pointed out that the Navajo, how do we pronounce this word again? Dene?
Dene.
Have the right idea about it, up and down. So it's a cyclical ideology, like water movements, to keep it fresh. So it's instead of an either or, it's sameness. It's a both and.
Yeah.
Am I understanding that right? It's a constant.
Well, okay. So he has more here. It is a cyclical life cycle, not really a spectrum. If you want something to live, you have to make it circulate like fresh water. Like, and in this case of the up down, as well as the rain and the water falling down, and then say evaporating back up, and it's not one then the other, even though you go from one to the other. It's,
I see.
And then so it's
like
up,
photosynthesis. It's always happening.
Yeah, so it's up, then down, then back, cyclical. Yes. So if you have to start at the bottom, everyone does. A wealthy person that has never suffered the hardships of being at the bottom is handicapped starting off. That's interesting. Well, maybe that's something that helps with that is the call to adventure and risk. To if you have the wealth, invest it. And that's one way they can get down.
Wealthy people not giving money to their children and making them make their own way.
And I've worked for a few people that were very much like that. I worked right next to their kid, and full adult, but they never got no handouts. They got a job,
even though parents are millionaire. Yeah.
So if it all boils down to the politics of humanity,
and what is best for most people.
Yeah. So it should
be way more responsive than our current system.
I think our current system is ossified, solidified, and is on the edge of shattering. So because it's not responsive, it can't keep up with what's going on. It doesn't listen to what most people want. If anything, it's been way too comfortable with the idea of telling us what we want and what we should want, and that's authoritarian garbage. It's like we shouldn't accept that, particularly as Americans. We're an ornery sort that shouldn't be putting up with that.
Agreed. Yeah. So the public. Okay. Also, without the Iroquois Confederate colonists still F it up with the help of the indigenous.
Well,
are we speaking to the practice of delegation that we picked up from the American Indian tribes,
or just the Iroquois Nation specifically? And actually, the reason why that confederation came to be is because, like any other human beings, the Americas were filled with violent tribes of people, and they needed to figure out a way to.
Many of which enslaving, stealing.
Oh, dude! Slavery was the thing. Brutal execution
of women.
Kidnapping, all that stuff.
Children.
But then also. They're humans. That's a human thing. To think that any human is outside of it.
Quite benevolent, loving, fair-minded tribes.
The Iroquois Nation came along to be like, look, we can't do this anymore between us. We need to fix this.
Yeah.
And also, who taught the colonials how to fight to get rid of the British?
Right.
Yeah. That this guerrilla warfare idea.
Guerrilla warfare was not a thing for us. We were lining up in rows.
It's like and brightly colored. Here I am. Gentlemen. Shoot me in the face. What? Okay, I get it. Like formation fighting, but once you get the gun, formation fighting doesn't make any sense anyway.
They could literally fire a chief if the need was there. Speaking of the Iroquois confederacies, so now there were more than 4 tribes in the Iroquois Confederate. Also, women held a lot of power. They owned the land and controlled a lot of things within the city. Interesting. Yeah, so very egalitarian. The idea behind that is that they are the closest to Red Mother Earth, therefore more conducive to life. But believe you're saying here is they found a way to be more symbiotic with the planet and one another, so a much more viable long-term survival strategy.
I think he's talking about the chief. So they could literally fire a chief if the need was there.
Got that.
So the idea behind that is that they were the closest. So the chief was the closest to Mother Earth.
Therefore, more conducive to life. So you need a good leader that can protect.
Well, responsibility.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I think
the vitality of that.
I think I know
because we come from
what you're getting at, and also the cyclical concept. I think is I won't say is necessarily the solution to this. Left, right, up, down, back, forth political mumbo jumbo that we got ourselves in, but I think it is a good path to start going down and understanding and trying to then apply. So like imagine in politics if we took into account our ever-changing tendencies and preferences throughout an individual's life, but then also multiple decades over large groups of people. And one thing, like, maybe we shouldn't have super crusty old people that don't have no stake left in America except to get out what they can before they die, writing our laws. There's got to be a cutoff somewhere or another. Like, I don't know how the Nancy Pelosi's, how is she still popular? How does she keep getting reelected? Like nobody likes Nancy Pelosi. She's just powerful, right? Or like Chuck Schumer, or is it Chuck Schumer? Or well, there's Chuck Schumer, but then there's who's the turtle man? Republican, looks like a turtle.
Mitch McConnell.
Yeah. Like how is he stuck?
I can't believe I got that.
Like, dude,
that's accurate.
And I'm not wishing him any ill will, but Nancy Pelosi just fell down and broke her hip. And then, they had Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Is that no, that was the
judge.
The judge. I'm talking about the really, really, really super old Democrat that we had. Not Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but
besides Pelosi, I can picture her.
What's her name? Where she was basically just like the crypt keeper at the end of her life, and she wasn't making any of the decisions. That's an obvious example of holding on to something so long. Like not letting it go until it breaks. And then the person just dies midway between, in their period of duty.
Yeah.
And then also this idea of that, we got to wait every 4 years or every 2 years to vote the hucksters out. I think we might need to streamline a way to get rid of bad politicians. I don't know how, but in a way that we
got to depopularize douchebaggery.
Well,
that's what we got to do.
If 85% of the population says no, this person's not working. Okay, out 85%. Really hard to reach that, but if they're really bad, I think we could probably get 85% of people in this country to get Nancy Pelosi out of here.
Yeah, I'd love to see term limits on Congress like we have for the presidency. These people way overstay. Like the majority of Congress is all baby boomers. It should be Gen X should be in there by now and be in the majority of Congress, but it's we have people overstaying their welcome. Great comments here, guys. Thank you so much.
Term limits.
I really appreciate the conversation you all having here. Yep, term limits.
Those were the idea to begin with when they put them on the president. Yeah, well, and I can entertain both positions on no term limits or very long term limits versus shorter term limits. And I'm going to start with shorter term limits. Well, obviously you got to get people out, and you don't want them to become so heavily entrenched into government and become super corrupt and have what we have right now, right? Okay. The argument against it, which I think is pretty valid, is you need people who knows how the pudding's made in there and are mastered pudding makers, and how to do that.
Yeah.
But I think it's striking a balance. So it's
I like what Official People's Party brought up here. Look. Long-term limits for Congress and the Senate was the idea to begin with when they put it on the office of the president. And then he says a loved president should be able to have longer term limits than Congress and Senate. I would actually agree with that because the president is the people's representative.
I'm
but we have to be very
I'm
careful
on the
with that
fence
one.
with
man.
that. I don't know if I
tricky.
agree or disagree, but I'm
Yeah.
on the fence. I see what you
I see
mean.
the point, though. I think it's a good point.
But well, we didn't used to have
Congress having no term limits is obscene.
Yeah, they just sit there until they die.
Yeah.
That should only be reserved for the judges, and I can understand why we don't have term limits on judges. Is because this should be their life. They are not political agents. Once they put on those robes and they sit there, they're basically like fixtures in the temple, and they should only just be living in the temple, if you will. You know, like the oracles in the temple.
Yeah.
They are not of, the highest judicial agents we have are not of the people and mingling around and being swayed by everybody's opinion and stuff. And Ketanji Brown Jackson going up on stage, she did a performance thing. I forget whatever play, but she was so excited to get the clapping. No judge should ever feel that for the praise of other people.
Yeah,
that goes against it. But that's the judges, and
that attachment to ego gratification is a bad sign. And also, the old saying, the best politicians are actors and the best actors are politicians. That's what I thought also when I saw that she was going to go do Broadway. I was like, yeah, you definitely are an actor at heart. So, Ninja Bet, Gollum holding the ring for too long.
Yeah,
I agree
exactly.
too. Egalitarianism is the best way, balances the communities. We just need to get feminism 2.0 out of our lives. You're talking about this third wave feminism that somehow is trying to excuse biologically born men competing in women's sports and some pretty radical stuff that obviously is, this is illogical. This is hurting women. This is hurting biologically born women, and that's absolutely not fair to them. So, that's I think that's a valid point. It's weakened men and made women delusional. We are like puzzle pieces, aren't we? The masculine and the feminine, and of course, we all have masculine and feminine tendencies or aspects to ourselves, because masculine and feminine is, a deeper concept than even sex, And I think it's good for us to be able to learn how to healthfully encapsulate or embody those aspects of ourselves. And I do believe that, there are differences, but there are complementary differences between men and women. We are puzzle pieces. We pick up where each other leave off. And I think that's so beautiful.
Yeah,
that's so exciting.
Different and complementary, not antagonistic.
Right.
Men, not equal. Men and women aren't equal. We're complementary.
Yeah.
We, under the law and societally speaking, men and women should be equal. I am a liberal in that sense. But when it comes down to biological realities and spiritual realities, we're not equal. We're complementary because it's not exactly the same shape, exactly the same thing. It's keyed together.
Yeah,
it holds the fabric of our reality together. This dual nature of masculine and feminine. It's so much so that
these are interrelating opposites, just like the yin yang is one thing, but it has these interrelating opposites within it.
And it's so profound, actually, and it's a shame like this, the gender critical movement and all this stuff has really destroyed it because it is only two things, and it's the two things. It's the give and take, the push and the pull, the light and the dark, the sky and the ground. There's a reason why we refer to the sun in the masculine and the moon in the feminine. There's a reason why things of curvy beauty we call she. Oh, she's a beauty, and you slap the car. There's a reason for that because it's so ingrained in our head to have that feel, to have that that understanding.
We're biologically tuned, in this way.
Now, there's a few things that don't reproduce actually. Molds and certain single-celled organisms, and there's like some self-cloning lizards out there, but like. Most life has the masculine and feminine in it, whether in the same plant in the case of
and the whole
plants,
universe has the interrelating opposites, up and down, light and dark, happy, sad, so on and so
the
forth. You can't have one without the other.
The ordered and the disordered. The ordered tends to be the masculine, the disordered tends to be the feminine because somehow women can deal with the chaos of like children and other stuff just biologically. And
chaos is also intensely creative, right?
Exactly. So it's like that's ingrained in us. And, usually I don't like to just have things in binaries. But in this case, it is a core essential binary function within us. Now it's not a spectrum. Now your expression on like, yeah, we got sissy boys that are very effeminate, but they're still boys. Save the sissy. He's not a girl. He's a sissy boy, and it's fine.
And the Tom girl is also still attractive and beautiful,
and still a girl.
Who she is and deserves to be able to be who she is.
So, yeah.
And doesn't necessarily mean that she's lesbian or should identify as a man or anything like that, which is the thing that a lot of young people are being told nowadays when they're probably just going to end up being gay or bisexual. They're being told, oh, well, you're actually probably this other gender. You should be identifying as this, and that will make you happy and less anxious. Well, actually, you're probably unhappy or anxious because you're a teenager or you're a young child in a confusing world.
Or you have abusive relationships in your life. But I think this really points back to...
You're being brainwashed by social media.
The video that we covered today, too, because it's the expectations of like, well, say, if you believe in a... less taxes, well, you must be on the right. It's like, well, no, I'm still like, on the left. I'm still a liberal. I just don't like having my money stolen by a bunch of money-grubbing politicians. Yeah. Oh, no. Well, if you play with dolls, you're a girl, so get them to dress. We've gone to the point
if you're
where...
anti-illegal immigration, and then you must be a rightist. Or if you are pro-environmentalism and caring about the planet, you must be a liberal or leftist.
And you can't care about and be an environmentalist if you haven't just gone all on board with climate change. Yeah. I tend to think like, I don't litter. I don't like poisons being put in the food, in the oceans. I think we, as America, should hold China accountable for how much waste that they put in the Pacific Ocean, seeing as how we share an ocean with them. Yeah. And instead of making ourselves suffer, and we're already doing better than most countries. And the only reason why the European countries do better than us as far as, they're green and all this other stuff is because we protect them. We put all of our money into protecting them, and they don't have to put money into it, so they can waste it. Like Germany getting rid of its nuclear power plants. You know where they're back to? Burning coal.
Yeah. Yeah, what the heck, dudes? You guys, and modern nuclear technology is much more fail-safe than it was previously.
And the Fukushima thing is like, well, Japan, not a good place for too much seismic activity, and also don't build it right next to the ocean. Anyway, but yeah, I'm getting on rambling, but the
official People's Party. My wife was a tom girl with Pakistani genetics. I'm hardcore. It's tomboy, guys. Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah,
tomboy.
You see tom girl.
Yeah. Well, hey, we haven't used that word in a long time. I think it was a slur for a while. Right? It's like if you said tomboy. Oh,
my youngest daughter's sort of tomboyish. Yeah. That's cool, man. That's actually really cool. Yeah, and then official People's Party is also saying she wouldn't care. She knew who she was. I knew who she was. That's all that matters, isn't it?
Yeah.
She even had a Muslim first name and was born here in Queens, New York. Very cool, man. This is America. We are a melting pot. I love that about America. How else would you get jazz, soul, and rock and roll, hip hop, stand-up comedy, and so many of the great movies and shows and other forms of art that we put out into the world without that cross-cultural pollination?
Well, and the best food, because America has the best food. And I'm not talking about cheeseburgers and hot dogs, but like there's so many different like subtypes of food from all the cultures that have come around here, like Cajun food. Or less specifically Southern food, or then you get into the Tex-Mex stuff, and then you go up north, northeast, you got all that different. Don't eat the lutefisk though.
I'm partial to Indian food myself, but I love American food too. But of course, the Indian food that I'm used to is the restaurant-style Indian food. That's
but you get it from
combination of British and British and India.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is and even like our instruments and our music are like. American rock and roll has roots also in India because of different migrations of people through different regions picking up different instruments. The guitar comes from Indian instruments. And like the British,
those instruments were carried here, and the local like Appalachian mountain music blended with the Irish jig music and so forth.
It actually has Appalachian music has quarter tone in it, which is an Indian scale pattern.
See,
Like a
there you
good
go.
example
Yeah,
is that I am a man of constant
Constant
sorrow. That's a
sorrow.
good modern example of that. If you actually look at it, it's quarter note modulations.
How cool.
Yeah, really cool stuff. Or quarter tone, excuse me,
Yeah,
not a quarter
yeah.
note. But yeah, and that's change. Now you can't, like, if you were to look at it the way the politics is being looked at right now, it's like, well, rock and roll's Indian then. Is that what you're saying? I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. Movements, cycles, breathing, the in and out, the up and the down, the aeration of the water.
So we need to come up with an animated 3D model. It's probably going to look something like a torus. It's going to be a sphere with another sphere below it, so it can encompass all the opposites of the political spectrum that is being detailed in the first sphere. And
It's more like a, you know what a Klein bottle is?
no,
You know what a Mobius strip is?
yes.
If
And
you
let's look that up for the audience.
If you
Klein bottle.
yeah, it's an impossible 4-dimensional structure, but it's basically a Mobius strip in 3D. So it's one-sided.
How do you spell it?
Klein, Kline, bottle.
Let's see it. All right.
It's probably going to end up being more of something like that. Yeah, so let me,
Like this?
no, like those actual bottles.
Yeah.
That's a 3D representation. So basically like that. The political spectrum is like that, and we're on it. And if you keep going, you'll end up on the inside of it. And if you keep going, you'll end up back on the outside of it, because there's no actual inside or outside. There's like, and then there's places where you can catch yourself in a loop where you'll just keep biting your own butt. And that's kind of where we're at. Like if you imagine the circumference of the, bottle one way, you'd just be going around and around. But if you flip it the other way, then now you can get into the, it's
Interesting.
yeah, it's a Mobius strip in 3D, basically. But the political
There's your
spectrum
Mobius
tends
strip.
to be more like that and constantly moving. So just look stuff up. I don't know how it work. How I'd plan it. I'm still working on giving a proper 3-dimensional. So I think for a 3-dimensional static observation system. Well, and actually, hey, don't even do it Cartesian. You can do it like basically vectors. You're going off in a direction. But the 3 directions to left and right would be, left would be yet again change and revolution. Right would be, or actually no, it's okay. The way I have it is left wing. The left end would be where are you giving the authority? Are you giving it to the state, or are you giving it to the people? And then the up down would be authoritarian, libertarian. So the individual down at the bottom, or the collective up at the top. No, yeah. And then you would have either secular and religious as the next axis.
You want to go off one of these charts here and
No, because they're all just wrong.
Yeah, you can correct them though. So just so we have something visual to show the audience.
I mean,
Yeah.
So go. Yeah, that one basically you have left.
Let me bring this up here. Here we go.
So left, economic, right, economic, and then libertarian, authoritarian. So who's dealing with the money? You want big government money, or do you want small government money? And then authority. Do you want the authority in the individual, or do you want the authority in? And I say collective, not in the sense of populist, but like overall authority, your government basically, which should be of the people. But then if you add another axis into that I would probably put that as the secular religious axis, which is actually very new because we didn't have a concept of a secular nation before. You'd go to different cities and they'd worship different gods. There was always a worshipful end. And then you put a fourth dimension to it, which would be we got that global or national. And these would be trends. So instead of, and I actually like the arrows that they're using because they're more, I know they're not denoting trend lines, but it would be trend lining. It would be like a schema versus a Cartesian graph.
Gotcha.
I think if we start looking at it as schema opposed to graphing and points in time opposed opposed to we probably looking at the movement of peoples and our opinions. I know it's complicated. I don't have my cheat sheeted here, and it's been about 1.5 years since I've touched it. So,
figure 8 equals infinity. That is your political spectrum. That's what I was intuiting when I said a Taurus, and
which I mean,
it is cyclical and never ending. Just use the figure 8 and call it a human. Yeah. And the ninja bat, we are supposed to be our own master. Morality is our guide.
Okay, so officials, people's parties, don't overthink it. That's what the colonists did. I don't know if you can say that. So it would be, yes, I probably shouldn't overthink of it, but that's what the colonists did. I don't know. I don't necessarily agree with that statement.
Well, I'm glad we can't agree on everything. We're here calibrating together, guys.
Nor do I think the original colonists.
And there's a point in there that I'm sure you're pointing to, People's Party.
Well, I think, with the whole that's ended up with this monstrosity that we have now, I would actually beg to disagree. I think the time that our forefathers thought about trying to make this system and think about contingencies and what's going to happen was the very reason why we haven't devolved into some, Marxist, communist, fascist hellhole.
Yeah, I think it's what helped us lift, over half the world out of poverty.
I think actually the inflation of the government and wanting to add too many people and too much, the middlemen, the administrators, that's what's really killed it, and has nothing to do with
way
our
too much
constitution.
bureaucracy. Yes.
Bureaucracy killed it, and blame it on the bureaucrats if you blame it on anybody.
Yeah, and a fair point. All I have to say is expand your knowledge. I think we can all do that, and come
that's what we're doing right now.
Come to
We're all
understand
doing
each other's
it.
points of view and where the value orientations are that they're rooted in, so we can see where each other are coming from.
Listen, if your wife puts the hammer down, you'll bend the knee. I don't have a wife. Well, yes, you got to listen to your wife.
Yeah.
Unless she's wrong, and then you need to tell her she's wrong.
And so with these points of view, we can so identify with this or that side or this or that point of view. And this is where our certainty really gets in our way. If we could all be less certain and more willing to always continually upgrade our understanding of reality, not so identified with being right, and rather looking for what is good and true for one and all. I think if that's our orientation, we're going to do much better at this thing. But we all get so certain, we're so identified with our beliefs, and then we end up like stereotyping whole groups of people. Like I think the colonists were a mixed bag. There was good colonists, there was not so good colonists. Some of the good ones did some really beautiful, profound things, though. And I think that the fact that they were multi-ethnic from different walks of life, different religions, that were coming to a place where they could, they were trying to form something where they could each practice their disparate religions freely together in the same nation, was a crazy, beautiful idea. And everything that makes America, the good things that we have here and in other self-governing nations are due to that kind of melting pot ethic, and
also I think
our willingness to work together with people with whom we don't agree on everything.
The hatred of colonialism too, that is just seemed to run rampant, like it's the devil, and actually colonialism wasn't all bad either. And I know you can't say this without being labeled far right, but if you look at the nations that were colonized, the most successful nations are ones that have been colonized. Minus a few,
depending on who they were colonized by, right?
Well, British colonization,
for instance.
For instance, and that's not a 100%, but it's usually, if there is something that goes outside of it.
Here's another important point that agrees with what you're saying here, because I think DJ has raised something that this is hard for some of us to hear sometimes, but every nation, every people were colonial up until the advent of the American form of republic. And so the whole world was enslaving and mistreating one another. It's not like it began with America by any means. It was happening for a long time before America. Just look at, for instance, the Muslims and their actions around the world in prehistory, and the vast amount of suffering and damage that some of those authoritarian-minded regimes caused.
The Arab slave trade, which is not really taught in the West.
Same issues the Romans had, you know, the Japanese,
Yeah.
the Chinese, all the European tribes, the African
Yeah.
peoples.
Well,
Everyone has enslaved their own people and their neighbors.
the richest man that has ever existed in the world, forget his name, it's like Mansu Mustafa or something like that. The richest king ever, he was an African king. How did he get that rich? He sold his quote unquote own people. And, you know, like, it's like, man, well, that can't be, because we're taught that, you know, Africans are nothing but victims, which is a bunch of crap. And I wish people would stop saying that, because actually, like, you know, give people chances to do stuff and stop treating them like they're lesser than. You'll actually find that no, Africans aren't just victims, and there's a lot of entrepreneurs in Africa that are actively trying to and making their own countries and their areas better. You know, it's just this weird, uniquely, what's the word for, you know, people in college and university? It's a very uniquely academic thing that I don't like. It puts a bad taste in my mouth, and it's actually racist. You know, I know a lot of people. I've been accused of being a racist a lot, but I am very adamantly against racism, to the point where I'm willing to admit that everybody's culture, or where they, not culture, but where they've come from in ancestry. Yeah, we all come from rapists, murderers, and whatever, but we also come from geniuses,
Rapists,
and the best people ever. We all it's all a mixed bag. And also, you know, whether you believe it or not, but we all come from, you know, the primordial Adam and the primordial Eve, so we're all just kind of related and have the same family, and same tendencies, and that doesn't mean you can't call out like cultures, because like I do believe that certain cultures are better. I think Western culture is the best thing that humanity ever did. I think that a culture that tells their women to never leave the house and completely clothe themselves and beats them and can honor kill them is not a very good culture comparatively. I know
if your goal is to have a fair, balanced, peaceful,
if your goal is to
existence.
progress as a human species and actually get past the point where we're stuck here on this rock,
and help actuate the thriving for one and all.
And what is good, you know, or some cultures develop faster than the others, and that's why they took over other cultures. Some tribes were just stronger, faster, and had pointier sticks at one point in time, and totally obliterated other tribes. You know,
technology, that was the only reason. Yeah, they had better technology. Sometimes not even better ideas, but definitely better technology.
Or, you know, a better location with better food supplies and stuff like that. Like the difference between highland and lowland peoples.
Yeah.
You know, lowlander people tends to be more traders and farmer types, whereas the highlanders tend to be more of the, you know, stereotypical, you
warrior.
know, pillage warrior kind of thing. Like, you know, that's, you know, and that's just geography.
Adaptations,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Luck of the draw of where you're born too. That's a big thing, you know. And hey, politically speaking, you know, if you're born in the middle of Kansas, you probably end up more of like middle of Kansas type thing. And then if you do branch out, you branch out. But imagine like, well, you're from Texas, which means you're automatically a bigoted white dude that hates Mexicans. And then there's just this really liberal Mexican chick that's like, I'm Texan and I'm a painter and a dancer.
Wait, what do you mean?
So yeah, you know, and it's hard to like be really, really granular and specific on everything too. So it's like, we are going to err and call people or lump groups of people together. That's just what we do to make it easier.
Yeah.
We all do it.
Your story.
And I don't know if it's necessarily a super horrible thing either.
Yeah. Well, I think this is probably a good point for us to go ahead and close it out for the evening. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Actuali. This has been Meaning Making 101, our weekly live stream where we try and make sense of this world together. Thank you guys for joining us and aiding us in that process. We could not be doing this alone. But that's the game, guys. We can figure this out together. We can change this world from the inside out. Let's close on this quote from Martin Luther King. It's actually a series of quotes that were fit together. A genuine revolution of values means that love, which all the great religions have seen as the supreme unifying principle of life, is going to have the last word. Let's let love have the last word, fam. Let's truly try to understand and see where each other are coming from. Let's seek out conciliation and compromise rather than just being right and putting others down and insulting and playing into this game of divide and conquer, because clearly that is what we are in the midst of. And if we can come together, left, right, center, independents, libertarians, progressives, anarchists, Marxists, everybody, if we can come together in common cause, we can change this world. And of course, always most immediately, we can change ourselves. We can be that change we wish to see in this world and help that naturally radiate itself out. So let's change the orientation, one of love, and let's change the game, fam. Love you guys. We will see you next time.
Yep. I'm going to wait for the meow, Ninja Bat. Just wait for it.
Yeah, it's coming. Prepare your own self.
And meow.
Oh, yeah. Let's dance our way out of here, guys. Yow.
All right. Peace out, guys. Y'all have a good night.